I'm Bill Calogero, and this is our first roundtable, Billy C's roundtable. And for today's roundtable, to my right, I got a former light heavyweight contender, Bob Benoit.
Benoit will do fine.
Benoit. And we got Dax Khan, a contributor to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. And of course, Alex Papali, he too is a contributor to the show. Today's topic for our roundtable is going to be the business of boxing and how it's changed and evolved over time. And how I want to start this, guys, is this. You know, prize fighting, the term prize fighting, has always been about fighting for money. And you know, like we were talking earlier, way back in bare knuckle days, you know, when you scheduled a fight, the winner would get all the money, and the loser would basically get nothing. They used to take a collection up for the loser, and it's kind of changed up until what we have today. Now, Bob fought in an era where, well, tell us, what was the deal about making money? And I mean, did you do it for pride? Did you do it for money? I mean, what's the truth?
Well, I did it for money. I mean, at the time, I was 18 years old. I was married, I had a child, and you know, I'd work all week long. I'd come home with $75. You know, so if you could have a fight, you'd pick up $50. Well, that was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal. So you'd have a 4-round fight. They'd pay $50. In New England was where I had most of my fights. Sam Silverman ruled the roost. Sam Silverman was a legendary promoter for 40 years. He's known as Subway Sam, Unsinkable Sam Silverman, and he was a legend. He was also very cheap. And he'd fight you over $10. But in 1966, when I started, you know, I was, like I said, I'd make $80 a week working in a factory, and if I could go and make $40 or $50 in a 4-round fight, it was a big, it helped, you know. And he ran shows every week. He ran shows in Portland, Maine. He ran them in New Bedford, Mechanics Hall in Worcester. He was the glue that held boxing together in New England for many, many, many years. So, I don't know, did that answer your question?
Well, it's on the right track, I guess, you know. But, you know, Alex, you and I worked on a project together about a bare knuckle fighter, Tom Molyneux, and we learned a lot about him and the price, I should say, the purse structures and how these guys fought. And when we were talking earlier, when you put the value of the money in perspective, it really hasn't changed that much. I mean, those guys were making more money than the guy working, you know, so to speak, a 9-to-5 job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the big. In some ways, that has changed dramatically today because, and this was something that was said up at the Hall of Fame the other day. The journalist Colin Hart, who's getting in this year, mentioned how, you know, it used to be the tradition in the whole world of sports that the heavyweight championship was the greatest prize in sports. Today, you know, if you join the NBA and do well, you might make more than a heavyweight champion possibly could, at least in the short run, and you don't have the same risks. So yeah, I think that the fact is that as much as there is all these kinds of real noble qualities, human qualities that are shown there in the ring of courage and pride and everything, it still is a job. It's a way of making a living, and it does have to provide some sort of stable sustenance for the people that do it.
You know, Dax, Bob mentioned about pride, and you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, rankings and stuff like that. And you know, you work your way up to a contender, and when there was one champion, 8 divisions, you know, those guys got to that they created that value, you know, to make it to that contender spot. Today it's a little different. There's so many different weight classes. There's all these sanctioning bodies, and we were talking the other day that, you know, conceivably if you pick just 5 of the sanctioning bodies, you could have 50 different top 10 contenders for every weight division. So I mean, you know, and then again we got the value and the business part that gets factored in. I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, and nowadays definitely the world titles are watered down. So, to be recognized, I don't care who's out there, whether you like them or not. You have to have that desire. Of course, it's a business aspect. And you brought up a good point before where, nowadays guys are getting smarter. It's not like it was back in the old days. How many of the guys, they died broke. Even the legends, the Ray Robinsons, very few guys like the Alis and that who've been able to use their persona and their personality afterwards to continuously carry them over. And but now use the heavyweight division as weak as it is. You have people like the Klitschko's. Fighters are smarter than what they were. They've learned from the past.
Right.
But also I don't care how much money you're making. You have to have the desire to be a fighter. If you don't have it inside you, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're taking that punch and the first time you get rocked, you're not going to fire back. There is no glory. And you're not getting paid on top of it.
Well, that's a great segue, Bob, because we always say, at least, I always say that the fighters, and these guys, they have to agree with me, otherwise we fire them. But the thing is this, you say to yourself, these guys today, the pride factor that you mentioned before. And what Dax mentions today, there's a script of how to get a title shot, and we already admit that the titles are watered down, so they don't carry the juice that they used to.
No.
But there's a script now, and they build up the record. They don't care who they're fighting. You got the TV networks, the promoters, everybody else. They look at that They see a fighter, a young fighter. We saw one last night, undefeated, 24-0. Who's he fought? And he loses to a guy with 5 or 6 losses that was supposed to lose.
Oh, really?
Last night. But my point is that when did the pride factor end? Because today it's all about the money. It's all about positioning to get that title shot that's associated with the money. And you fought in an era where I believe that pride still was an important part of the game.
Oh yeah, I mean nobody wants to lose. I mean. At what point? Who wants to lose?
Yeah, but don't you learn from a
everybody has
loss?
pride. I mean,
But don't you learn from a loss? A good fighter will take what he learns.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. What happened is that media has interjected themselves into the sport, and they're marketing it, and they're going to twist it to what way will market best. Okay, and somebody with a undefeated record it's eye-catching, it's ear-catching, okay? And it's going to market well. It's, if we could take them out of it, okay, and have no TV, all right, and just have fights like they used to, small fight clubs everywhere, okay?
Well, look at
it
this.
would rejuvenate a certain aspect that's missing now, but that ain't going to happen.
In the era that you fought, in the late 60s, early 70s, and actually a little before that, there was so much boxing on television, and this is amazing that there was so much boxing on television that they had a separate TV guide just to keep track of all the fights. So I mean, it's not like the fights weren't on television. I just think that what you hit on was that the television, when a fighter gets on TV now, there's just a lot more money to be made.
And it actually bastardized the sport, if there's such a word. I think there is.
I think so.
Okay? and it took away a certain element that was prevalent in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And TV was a big introduction into the sport of boxing. And it helped and it hurt at the same time. It killed all the small fight clubs, the small gyms, and we can't have it both ways. What do you want, TV, or do you want live shows?
But, Alex, we're always talking about the people that are making the decisions, and Bob hit it right on the head. We talk about this all the time, where, that's what they're selling. They're selling the 24-0 guy. We want to see him, he must be good. He's undefeated. He's got 24 wins.
Right.
He's got no losses. He must be good.
Right.
And my big gripe is that the guy making the decision to bring that fight to his or her network doesn't know the sport.
Right.
They're looking at that 24-0 record.
Exactly.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think what Bob said is true. That I think one of the things that's happened is that and perhaps I'm showing some of my radical socialist leanings here, but as things have,
Well, I'm glad he's sitting over there.
as things, I mean, we're living in the
Don't get
21st
him started.
century here, where we've seen the 80s, where the rise of corporate power and really the marketing. Everybody now is part of, especially with the internet. Everything has been marketed like crazy, and what happens with that is you get these little false realities that within their own world, if you just look at the small picture they're presenting, things look great. Yes, this guy's a title holder, and he's fighting here on our network, and he's the champion. But if you just look at that casually, okay, you're watching a title fight and you watch it. And for the uneducated viewer,
Right.
that's enough.
Yeah.
And that's what the suits, if you will, making the decisions, that's all they care about. And for that, you want to have things that look good. So a guy who's 24-0, they don't care who he's beaten. He's got a 24-0 record. So that's going to look good on our network.
Yeah.
Whereas a guy who maybe is 11 and 7, who maybe those 7 losses were good fights
Yep.
Yeah.
and close fights, the
Yep.
network's not going to show him.
Right.
So I think because of that, you have a watering down of the very best at the sport, because you almost end up getting just the best of what network has to offer.
Dax,
Yeah.
Alex has gone on record as saying that, he doesn't care about the same fan he's referring to now, that casual fan that is actually, maybe he's got a point, because that casual fan that's looking
Yeah.
at that 24-0 record and saying, oh, he must be good,
Yeah.
maybe he's got a point that, boxing maybe has it evolved to the knowledgeable fan, the guy that can look at that 11-7 record and say, wow, this guy's a lot better, really, than that 24-0 fighter.
You know what really hurt is boxing has had to, the guys have had to become showmen, not showmen like back in the Ali days where, they talked a good smack, but, showmen like, Mayweather, where they have to have the big build-up.
Right,
You know who caused that? And as much as I love him, knew him since, been followed him since I was a kid, was Mike Tyson. He was the, the start of the big pay-per-view era. But, the casual fan, like Alex was talking about, were the ones who buy the pay-per-views, and, they were getting awful mad at Mike knocking guys out in the first and second round at $50 a pop.
I don't know if I agree with that, because people love. I know myself during the Mike Tyson, which is pretty sad. All of us in this room can think of the Mike Tyson era as just happened a couple of years ago, and it's been 25 years. But the thing is that I knew that myself when there was a Mike Tyson event on. I was just as happy if that fight had ended in 30 seconds or if it went long into the 6th round or something.
Absolutely. I mean, sure, we kept buying, we'd all complain. Matter of fact, I remember after one Tyson fight, at the time, I was only maybe 21. I was a bouncer at a bar, and I had a friend of mine fill in because it was a Tyson fight. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. And I remember going out to the bar and working the door, and they had a karaoke thing on, and the boss says to me, he goes, oh, where you been? I said, I just got ripped off by Mike Tyson. I said, a minute and 10 seconds into the second round. But, we went and we bought the fights again anyway. But, now as the price of it's gone up, people nowadays are saying to themselves, and you got to blame the networks for this as well, why am I paying $60 for a fight that next week I'm going to watch for free?
Because you want to see it live. I mean, I have an excuse. I have to do it. But, Bob, you said an interesting thing before. We were talking before we went on about the purses and how they really didn't change for a long time. And like what Dax was saying, in that era, the 80s, they actually were making some big purses. I mean, the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Tommy Hearns, Mike Tysons, Holyfield, they were making double-digit millions.
Right.
That kind of feathered out a little bit. But what we were talking about earlier, you said for at least 20 years that 4-round or 6-round fight, they were making the same.
Stayed right there. And pay-per-view, okay, is what jacked the prices up, purses up, okay? That's, you can get 10,000 people in an auditorium, or you can get 200,000 people watching it on TV.
Right.
Do the math, you're going to make more money. So, like I said, in one hand it helped, okay, in the other hand it hurt. So, take your choice. But get back to fighters and records. Brings to mind a fighter called Lou Jenkins. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Also known as Sweetwater Lou, okay, from Sweetwater, Texas. If you look at his record, he was welterweight champion of the world.
Right. He's a Hall of Famer, isn't he?
Yes. A Hall of Famer. Look at his record. Start off, win, loss, win, win, loss, draw. I mean, and it was banging around Texas, okay, and they finally got on his motorcycle and drove up to New York City and took a locker at Stillman's gym and took off from there. But they're very up and down record, okay? So records can be earned and they can be also created.
That was then. Today's fighters look at the O. We hear that from the younger boxing fan on a daily basis. They put so much value in the O. You know who? The guy that I can't stop bringing him into the conversation, but Floyd Mayweather Jr., he banks his whole legacy on that O, Alex.
Yeah, on being undefeated, it's tremendously important, to him, and it is important in terms of the sport. But you're right. I mean, I don't think it's not everything.
I don't think it defines a quality fighter.
A fighter can lose a fight today, and he's locally. He could be a buy. I saw him fight last night. He'd look, and they write you off. Where the Red Sox or the Yankees could play and get killed one day, and they come back the next day,
and that game is forgotten.
They forget all about it. There's a bigger stigmatism attached to the sport of boxing than any other sport, a win or a loss. It really is.
The win-loss thing is funny to say, because the other day, on I think it was Thursday's show, we were talking about the win-loss thing, and the one that I brought up was because Arturo Gatti is getting inducted this weekend, was his fight with Thomas Damgaard over in Denmark. Now we'll talk about the pride part and how important the O is. Now Arturo here, he could always draw in Atlantic City, no matter what. Arturo's always going to pack the house, especially after his fights with Mickey Ward. Everybody wanted to watch Arturo. Everybody wanted to watch Mickey because you were going to have a good fight.
Even before that, Tracy Patterson fights. He was just
Thomas Damgaard had the O at the time, and over in Denmark, you know what it was? He was a national hero because he had the O. Yeah, he had some version of a title that's not even in the top 5 or top 6 of the ABC. And Arturo went over there because that's where the money was, and they knew Thomas was going to pack the house. They knew that they were going to get a good TV audience. Arturo goes over there and blasts room in a couple rounds because Damgaard made the mistake of let me go in there and try and be like Mickey Ward did. I'm going to be a hero at home. Where's the lad? Never heard of Thomas Damgaard again after that. But the O was important.
Arturo was a prideful man. He was a prideful fighter. He lost a fight in Atlantic City. It might have been one of the Ward fights or something, or the Ward fight. But he had a limousine that drove him in there. He walked. He walked from Jersey City back to New York. He walked. Wouldn't take the car. He was humbled. Okay, he said, "I don't deserve to get a ride back." So he walked back.
Well, see, the old thing bothers me because, like you point out about Lou Jenkins, but there's so many great fighters that you could say. Henry Armstrong, didn't he start out 0-2, 0-3, something like that? Jack Johnson lost many fights. The great Sugar Ray Robinson lost great fights.
Yeah, Hopkins
lost his first fight.
Yeah, really?
I think even Glenn Coffey Johnson was the same situation.
Yeah, so I mean,
speak about guys with the O's. Here's two guys. One, Glenn Johnson, and then you take Vernal Phillips. Two guys that they have those losses. Better than their records, but they never got the big paydays because exactly that thing. They had those losses on their records.
Marketability. They weren't marketable.
But that's today's boxing.
Today.
Right. Because yesteryear, and not that long ago, 20, 30 years ago, I think that the boxing fan was more knowledgeable of the sport. Now, like Alex said before, they're looking at, this guy's a title holder. We joke about it all the time that there's got to be more fighters today with belts than there are without. We watched all these fights yesterday. Not one world champion on the card last night. And every one of them came out with belts. One guy even came out, I think it might have been the main event, he comes out to, here comes the champion, here comes the champion. I said to Alex, what belt does he have? He doesn't have any.
John Scully says to me, he goes, what's a guy from Virginia have the Caribbean Fed Latin title for?
I know, it's crazy, man. And I don't think we can ever go back to the way it was.
It's tough. It's just like giving somebody something for nothing, it's awful hard to take it away once he's getting it for nothing, you know?
Uh-oh.
We'll leave the social aspect out.
We're talking boxing now, Alex.
Well, and to sort of make that connection there is that what you were saying is that earlier about how, you know, in terms of the mainstream fan and how do we change that if you're putting in front of the mainstream fan, this guy is 23-0 and you should admire him and you should think of that as as some sort of standard in the sport. Well, the only way to change that is to educate the mainstream fan. And
Do they want to be educated?
well, and that's just maybe not.
I do.
Maybe not. Maybe some of them don't.
Yeah, but
and I think that the problem with that is that
No, but I think they do.
I think that what bothers me a lot is that you go to the water cooler, the old term, Monday morning, you go to the water cooler, Joe Schmo that isn't a diehard anything fan, he'll talk about the baseball games over the weekend, the football games, even a hockey game, and then the only fights he's going to talk about are those big pay-per-views that we're spending $70-80 for.
Right.
And he's not talking about the real club shows that are the backbone of the sport.
right. But see, that was my point. Is that real change comes from the bottom up. So what that would mean is that by educating the people in by forms of media, by writing and stuff like that, in terms of covering the sport, and if you watch a fight and explaining why this guy is better than his record, that's the way just any kind of change comes. Is that slowly, because the guys who are making money, it's not in their interest to change at all. I mean, one of the things that up at the Hall of Fame yesterday was women's boxer Mia St. John was there. She was talking about how some of the fights that are definitely ones that people want to see in women's boxing just don't get made, in part because maybe there's a little pocket of people in one region that support one of the fighters, and then another little pocket in another region that support the other, but they can't find a site that fills an arena. But the thing is, we see lots of fights that get made, and there's significance attached to them simply because they do have a site to put a fight together.
Yeah, but
so I think the only way to counteract that is if the people watching know this doesn't mean what they're saying it means.
But the part you left out, and this is a good to go back to when you were mentioning about the promoter, is that no promoters promote female boxing. That's the problem. There's very few promoters that are associated with female fighters. Fresquez with Holly Holm, Sauerland Events with Cecilia Brackus are the two top ones. But, we can blame everybody. Right now we can blame, and I say this a lot on our show, but you could blame the managers, you could blame the fighters for being greedy, we could blame the networks and the suits, we could blame them all. And we can also blame the fans, we could blame the promoter. But I believe if you have to blame one, I think it is the promoter. The early promoters, going way back in the bare knuckle times, Alex and I, we learned stuff like, you'd get 10,000 people show up at a bare knuckle fight. They would sell tickets with no date, no location. That's promoting. You get 10,000 people to show
Well, they were
up.
hiding from the police because a lot of,
Okay,
you know what I mean?
but-
That's why they didn't want to put it out there.
Okay, but that's still. How do you sell? 10,000 tickets with no date. Talk about
There you go. That's
talk
great.
about the grapevine.
Yeah.
Johnny Dangerously. The grapevine has changed.
Yeah.
But today's promoter has gotten lazy. They make fight. What would you have said if a promoter said to you when you fought in the late '60s? Hey, Bob, we want to put you on the show, but how many tickets can you sell?
Oh,
You're like, wait a minute, I'm training, I'm
Yeah.
preparing for the fight. I'll get people to come see me, but what? You making me sell tickets
Yeah.
from my purse?
They
That's
push
what they do
tickets.
today.
They push tickets on, even back then, they'd push them on you.
To
Oh.
fight for your purse?
Yeah, well, no, Sam Silverman would sometimes pay a guy, here's 40 tickets. Okay, you sell those 40 tickets.
You keep all the money.
And you keep the money, okay. And that, and he said, well, if you can't bring 40 people in here, why would I have you fight on my card? Yeah, it kind of made a little bit of sense, you know what I mean?
I guess.
From a promoter's standpoint,
Yeah.
But it was a pain in the ass, it really was. And you're right, you got a fight to worry about. You also got to worry about ticket stubs and
Right.
getting all the money in,
Right.
and who stiffed you on the ticket.
Right.
You know, we'll pay you next
meanwhile,
day.
you're trying
And that's a better fight than the one you're gonna have in the ring, right? The guy who stiffed you for $20, you know. But I think promoters don't really promote as well anymore. They want that big pay-per-view. They want to get involved
Yeah.
with that, but
They're lazy.
But these
They're
club
lazy.
shows that are the backbone, we see it all the time when we go to these shows, Dax. That we look around. Even last night, Alex, we're looking around going, "This is the Hall of Fame weekend. This place should be mobbed."
Yeah.
And we knew that, okay, they just announced this fight 3 weeks ago, but then we noticed other things. Every fighter was, had to be flown in. There was no local kids on the show.
Yeah, you gotta have.
You
local
gotta
talent.
have,
You gotta have it. That's the glue that holds the card together, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes a
Well,
big...
and look at the fans' reaction. I mean, those first couple of bouts where they were fighters from different states or different nations, the crowd was pretty quiet. As soon as you had a Buffalo guy in, they woke up.
Yeah, and the
Because where are we? We're in upstate New York, so that's
right.
what they want to see.
And the guy who upset in the main event, he actually was a last-minute sub from Albany, which is about 2 hours from there.
Nick Brinson,
Yeah. So a lot of things have changed, and we were talking about media. You tossed that in. The internet, I think, was good and bad for the sport. I mean, today. Way back when, every single newspaper in the United States had a boxing beat reporter.
That's right.
So you'd be able to pick up the newspaper the next day and find out what happened,
Right.
or the Ring magazine. Everybody waited to get it to see
Yeah.
what the rankings were.
Yeah.
Well, now, we could go online and the writers sitting next to us were writing stories that are being uploaded. As soon as the fight, Alex was tweeting. What was going on,
Facebook.
punch by punch. People that aren't here are picking it up. I mean, that's changed the game a lot since when you fought.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you 100% on that. But I mean, that's life. I mean, we're evolving in all aspects of our life, and boxing, right along with it, is stuck in that mix. So,
You think it's hurting the sport, Alex?
I think maybe in some ways, but I think, like what Bob said, it's true. It's like... just like in anything else, there's going to be an adjustment period. I think boxing has done well in some ways. I mean, for me, I think if I was a fan just starting out, I'd be pretty thrilled that now you can follow your favorite fighters on Twitter. You can befriend them on Facebook. You can see boxing news every single day. When I got into the sport, the New York Times had a boxing writer, the New York Post had a boxing writer, USA Today, they all did. But the thing is, there wasn't a boxing article every day. There wasn't, boxing magazines would come out much later.
Right.
So in terms of that, in terms of getting a hold of news, little tidbits of information, it's great today. The thing is it really information that means anything?
Well, let me ask you.
There you go.
Let me ask you
There
this,
you go,
Dax.
right.
Today, I think that a lot of this technology has taken advantage of the true boxing fan, and what I mean by that is just like we were talking about pay-per-views, the cost of the pay-per-views. Only the big fights are on pay-per-view. Not only did yesteryear a boxing fan could go buy a ticket, go see an event, maybe watch it on Gillette Fight Night or something. Now we get club shows, and then the big shows are pay-per-view. We even take it a step further. You got Greed Factor coming in with webcasts of club shows that they want you to pay for, $9.99. So I mean, why are boxing fans fleeced the most out of any other sport in this country or any other country? There's no other sport. You can watch a baseball game, a football game, a basketball game on regular TV or listen to it on the radio for nothing. But boxing isn't like that.
And it's, you hit it on the head. It's more this country, because in any other country, take an example, every week, and you mentioned female boxing before, every week when I do my rundown on the show, every week I mention female fights. Where are they? Mexico and Argentina. And you know what? They headline.
Well, they have a fan base.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They headline. It's all about the promoting. And as Bob was saying, back in his day, we get 40 tickets here. You sell these 40 tickets, bring these guys in, it's going to help you get paid. You know what? In a way, though, Bob, that's kind of good nowadays. Because look at nowadays, we were talking about this or on Facebook or something. Now, all the fighters now, last night, Miguel Cotto, he promoted the card. You got Saul Alvarez, he's a promoter now. Obviously, Oscar De La Hoya, the Klitschko's went into it, Ricky Hatton. Now all these fighters, you know what, if I'm selling the tickets to my own fight anyway, I might as well get all the money for it instead of just sell the tickets so I can get paid my thing and make you the money. You know, it's smart. It's an evolution. You know, as you were saying, little by little, things are changing. Guys are getting smarter, and guys are understanding.
Well, what would you change about? If you know, there's aspects of sport that you don't like now, what would you change? What would you like to bring back?
8 weight divisions, number one.
All right, yeah.
One world champion.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to have one world champion in every division, even if we couldn't give up all the bogus divisions, the 2-pound differences. Even if we have to keep 32 weight divisions, you know, I would much rather have one champion.
Yeah.
And every single one of these sanctioning bodies are against unification.
But you got to climb the ladder
Well,
too.
because it's against
Right.
their best interest. Their best interest.
Money.
Right, they could make a lot more money by promoting lots of title fights, and I think that's where boxing is a niche sport, and today we still have it's a very enthusiastic niche, but it is a niche.
It's a niche within a niche. Sports are a niche. Sports are a niche.
That's good.
Right? And then boxing's a niche within that. So you're that much down. You know, it's sad, really. It's sad because you got all these champions. We got division in the sport where we need continuity. You know, like Alex said, all these different sanctioning bodies. Let me ask you this: can you name how many world? You know, it's kind of funny because the era that you fought in, you know, every one of us, we're all old enough to know, at one time remember, I know who every champion is.
Yeah.
I know who this guy is, that guy, right?
Yeah.
Now, you know, I talk to people on the street and they're like, oh, I used to follow boxing. Who's the champion? You know, the last one I remember is Mike Tyson, you know, and even he came in an era where there was multiple belts. I mean, you know, how much has that changed? What do you think of a world champion, an interim world champion, a world champion in recess, a super world champion, a silver world champion, a diamond world champion? I mean, I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up. You know, I mean, how ridiculous is that?
You just made my stomach feel.
Exactly. You know, I mean, and then we said, what's wrong with the sport? What do you mean, what's wrong with the
There you
sport?
go.
You know, I mean, you know, I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's ridiculous, and it's morphed into something that's just unpleasant. If you're a fight fan, it's just nauseating to see what's happening to it. So, but what's it going to change? People will eventually get sick of it too. You don't have to be a diehard fight fan. You know, after a while, you say, "This is a lot of baloney here."
They are now.
Yeah, but wait a minute. What's happening? Yeah,
Even
but
nowadays they are. That's why a lot of people, even fans, don't only recognize whoever has the ring.
Wait a minute. The older fans that can compare to what we've lived through to see change, but the younger fans, Alex, I know you're going to agree with me. They've accepted the way things are. You know, they are okay with a guy like Floyd Mayweather. He's great because of his O. They're okay with this belt and that belt. He's a champion. He's a world champion. You know, I mean, you know, is it ever going to be? Are we ever going to get the power? I mean, once, you know, our generations are all looking from grass at the other end of the, looking at grass from the opposite end. I mean, when you know, and I put this in perspective, 25 years from now, Floyd Mayweather, is he going to be looking? Are they going to remember the fighters from the 20s and the you know, turn of the century and that kind of stuff? Maybe not.
You know, can I just stick my nose in here briefly, okay? I teach a boxing course. I used to teach a boxing course when I was on the job, okay? And I would have a class of 100 recruits in front of me, okay? And I would ask them, who knows who John L. Sullivan was? And I'll have 100 people in front of me, all young guys, okay? And I might get a 2 or 3, 4 hands. I'm not kidding you. That's all.
Wow.
That's all. You know?
Yeah.
You know, and John L., I mean, you know, 100 years ago was a rock star, 120 years ago. But, you know, so it's the way of the world, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with how things have changed, you know, overall. But I do still think that there are going to be people that do know, and that and I think there are writers that cover the sport today that do a very good job at you know, explaining that, or sort of deconstructing what's put in front of them by promoters. Because again, a lot of times it is promoters, and when this is good and bad about boxing. In a business sense, in terms of free enterprise, because there's no single organization, like you were saying earlier, how no other sport has that, where these lots of little promoters are able to, make a living, set up a system where they put on shows repeatedly, and maybe have their own sort of regional champions with sort of paper titles, whatever, and there's a bogusness to it. But if it keeps making money, they don't care, because it's generating. That's part of the problem. Without a league, then you do have these promoters who might have a scorched earth policy of, like, they don't care how it affects the broader sport, they care about how much they make. The thing is that you're going to need writers, you're going to need the fans to sort of be able to see that and interpret what's really happening there, and it is hard.
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, and the business of boxing, obviously, we could go on and on and on. Thank you for joining us. Bob, I appreciate your time. Dax, Alex, I'm Billy C. Until next time for our next roundtable, we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.